And then as well as, when I look, the ASAP model, even though it didn't succeed for us in St. Pete and we pivoted to catering about a couple of years ago, it helped me understand more about drivers, okay, and delivery, because I all of a sudden became a delivery driver myself. And I have personally delivered over 600 orders in the Tampa Bay area. So, I learned, the stresses involved in that and the challenges for drivers. So one of the things for an entrepreneur is you really need to understand every single aspect of your business. Okay. You need to do it, not just think you know it. You have to do it. Believe me, when you start doing it, then you really understand what's going on.
Welcome back to The M Factor, conversations with entrepreneurs who started, stumbled, and succeeded. Today, we're going to explore another story that shows us entrepreneurial grit, growth, and resilience. I'm Rebecca White, your host, and I'm very excited that you've decided to join us today. We've got someone on the podcast that has a long history of entrepreneurship and of working with mentors and role models. So I wanted to start by talking a little bit about that today. In my own life, that role model was my mother. She was a small business owner with an insatiable curiosity and a fearless approach to risk. She taught me that if I'm not failing now and then, I probably wasn't doing anything worth doing. And I remembered that lesson throughout my life. And in a recent podcast, I had the chance to talk about failure and about learning with another one of our great guests on the podcast. And it reminded me to think a little bit more deeply about this topic and to share a little bit more about it with my listeners. So what is the role of failure and what does it mean to learn and to learn from mentors and role models? Well, today we're going to be talking to Mike Magee, and our guest is really someone who has taken many of these lessons, starting with role models even in high school and mentors in high school who taught him the importance of resilience and getting back up after things that didn't work out quite like he expected. That is, after he didn't get the outcome he wanted and what some might call a failure. But the reality is that failure is really one of our best ways to learn. And our mentors and coaches in life can keep us on the right path as we navigate those challenging failures. But the interesting thing is we can learn from anyone. In this story today, you're going to hear from Mike Magee. He's a phenomenal example of this very situation that I'm talking about. That is learning lessons along the way in a long career. From early lessons that he learned from his father and his uncle about not giving up to building and rebuilding businesses through booms, busts, and pandemics, Mike's story is one of persistence, reinvention, and deep community commitment. He's someone who can teach us that we can learn anywhere and from every situation. He's the founder of LoCo Tampa Bay, a socially driven catering company that's not only challenging national giants, but is also doing it in a way that keeps money in the local economy and gives back to local charities. And in true hands-on style, Mike himself has delivered over 600 meals to customers. Mike is someone that has shown persistence throughout his career. He's someone that's shown us that if you really have the determination, you can get in there and you can learn from every situation. I hope you'll think a little bit more about how you're approaching learning and failure and challenges and how all of this can help keep you resilient on your own entrepreneurial journey as you listen to Mike's story today. This episode is packed with lessons about learning from failure, mentoring the next generation, and building businesses with heart. Yes, giving back and having purpose is also one of the most important things that I've found most successful entrepreneurs are doing. So let's dive in and let's learn some lessons from our guest today, Mike Magee. Welcome to the In Factor, Mike.
Thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have you here. I met you recently in the Lowe Center, and you and your son came up for a visit to the University of Tampa, where I'm the director of the center there. And we had a little tour, and I learned about your business at the time, and I thought I got to get Mike on the show. He's got a lot to offer.
Well, I certainly have a lot of stories to tell, that's for sure.
Well, I love it. I love it. You know, Mike, you are the founder of a company here in Tampa Bay called LoCo Tampa Bay. And you've got a great long history of entrepreneurship and business and a lot of stories to tell, as you said, and a lot of lessons that we can learn from you. But I loved that when I asked you a little bit to tell me a little bit about yourself, you said your life motto has been work hard, play hard. And I like that as well. I think that's a great motto. But I'd love to know a little bit before we get into that and some of the other things about what you've done and about LoCo, or well, about everything that you've done. I'd like to start by talking about LoCo and what is LoCo Tampa Bay for our listeners.
Yeah, what LoCo Tampa Bay is, we're a locally owned office catering marketplace of restaurants, okay, specifically for office catering. So think really Uber Eats, DoorDash, okay, but for office meetings. So we help restaurants and mostly independent restaurants, local guys, increase their catering revenue, okay, their office catering revenue. And then we also deliver those orders, okay, that's really key, for customer satisfaction, to make sure that those deliveries are on time. Very, very important.
Hey, I love that. I love that mission because you started out by saying you're helping other businesses in Tampa Bay.
That's
And
right.
I like that a lot. I think that, having a sense of purpose and feeling like you're making a difference in the lives of other people and businesses, it helps make all the hard work worthwhile. And I think we actually met you because we had some food delivered, right? To the
Yeah,
Low
we
Center.
did. Absolutely. Yes. I actually did the delivery that day. Then I learned about the center really at that time and what was going on. And I, talked about what I was doing as a social enterprise, because that's really what we are we're not just another office, marketplace like an Uber Eats or DoorDash. Okay. Our mission is more about giving back. So our social enterprise, we give up to 50%. Okay, 50% of our profits back to the community. So customers get about 26% of that. Referrals get 14% of that. And then about 10% goes back to a charity that we support, cancer charity. It's called the Florida Cancer Specialist Foundation. And what that charity does is helps local cancer patients going through treatment pay their bills if they can't work.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, we see a lot of that with our students at the university, a lot of interest in doing social enterprise. So I think it's a great role model. So you've been in business for a while, doing a lot, not necessarily with LoCo at Tampa Bay,
Right.
but doing a lot of other businesses. And so I think it would be really great to get a little history lesson on how you got to Tampa Bay. I know you haven't been here a long time, actually. And I'm grateful that you chose Tampa Bay because I live here as well for this business. But your history is a little different. So how did you get to this point in your life that you're here in Tampa Bay with this
Right.
particular business?
Well, I'm from Richmond, Virginia. Okay, that's where I grew up. Growing up, I was really into sports and that kind of thing, and played a lot of football, basketball, and then as I was entering my high school, I'd played football growing up, and my father at the time, he's still around, but he was like, Mike, you need to set some high goals. You need to go for, making the varsity team, which was a big challenge. Because back in the day in high school, you had sophomore, junior, and seniors. Okay. So we had this big class of middle school people coming in, and it was a lot of boys going out for the team. And so I just sat down with my dad. He's like, hey, we need to set some goals. You need to, be prepared and get ready for that challenge. And So over the summer, I worked hard. I got in shape. And by the time I got to try out, growing up, I was always kind of a tough kid anyway. Okay. But I needed to kind of stand out. Right. And the way to stand out was to obviously, to be in shape. And when you showed up, a lot of boys did not do that back in the day. They were just dying the first couple of days, of 2 days. And I was running, and my dad was like, okay, now when you go from one because they would take you from one spot, learn this, and then you have to run to another spot and do that. But he was like, you got to sprint over there, not just, jog. So anyway, I did all that, ended up actually one of four of the boys to make the varsity team that year. So, it really proved to me that hard work and dedication and, setting goals, number one, and that hard work to follow up to do that really worked for me. So it built a lot of confidence for me. And then not long after that, I was getting ready to go to college, and my uncle Bob, he was in IT. Okay. Um, he kept telling me, Mike, you need to get into the IT world. That's what's coming. This was back in 1980 or 78. I graduated from high school in 78. So this was still new. And so I went to college. They only had like one IT course. I just kind of floundered at college. It wasn't kind of my thing. So I went back home, but I ended up getting a computer operator job right away, thanks to my dad, who had some connections, okay, in Richmond. And so I started out in IT as a computer operator, and then progressed into eventually sales, which was really where I found my niche. I wasn't a great programmer or anything. I'm more of an extrovert kind of guy. I got into sales, and when I first started, it was, a little more difficult than I thought. The company I started with was a small integrator, and they sold all kinds of things from PCs to Ethernet cards to whatever. So I started in sales. They got me trained. I had some training. And in my first quarter of sales, I didn't hit my number. Okay. My sales number. So the owner and the sales manager brought me into the office and said, Mike, hey, we love you. You're a great guy, but you just don't, we're not sure you can make it in sales. And, I remember the owner telling me, Mike, you need to take the bull by the horns and go get it, man. You can't be too nice. You got to just go get it. And so, I took that advice, and the next quarter I hit my number, and not only hit my number, I was salesman of the quarter. And then for the next 3.5 years, I hit and then about that time after that experience, the confidence was growing, right? And boosted. And I was being successful. I had a lot of great contacts, not only in the community as far as corporations, but I had developed some relationships with some of our technology partners, which was really key because they are the ones software and hardware. So Sun Microsystems, Sybase, PowerSoft. And so I started working with those reps, and they would feed me some leads right here or there. So eventually, I thought, wow, I need to do this on my own. So I ventured out, started my own IT company in my mid-30s, IT sales, hardware, software, and consulting, selling consulting services. So that started out very, very well. And then it wasn't too long after that, my old boss came back after me because I had signed a non-compete, and he went to enforce the non-compete, and I ended up in court and lost. So the business I had started called Client Service Solutions, it couldn't go anywhere because I was banned from doing any business in Richmond. So, that lasted just over a year and a half or so. But we were really that was kind of my first real, I know you talk about stumbling, right?
Right.
That was more of a knockdown for me, okay, because I'd put my heart and soul into it. I could see that, this thing was really taking off, and it just shut me down. So it was really, a tough,
Lesson, a tough lesson to learn.
it was a tough lesson to learn for sure.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but then I bounced back. I got some direct sales, software sales jobs, and that was, very, very successful, and ended up selling software. Then I moved to a tech company. It was an internet company called Digital Island out of San Francisco, and they were doing content delivery, which is now really the platform for the, the web basically, and people using the web as, the platform to do business. So anyway, I did that. That was great, and had a nice run. It was one of those tech startups in 1999, and then in 2000 it all imploded. Right in April 2000, I was part of that. Uh, anyway, back to it was really the cloud is what we were building, is the word I was trying to get to. So we were building the cloud back in 1999. I was part of that, which was pretty cool. But then when the tech stocks crashed, my options, which was something that was really new to me. It was kind of in that time frame, going to work for a tech company, getting stock options was the hot thing to do. If you remember Netscape, when they first came out, I mean, their stock just went crazy. And I had some friends from Sybase that went over there and they were calling that, man, I just made this much money and, all that, right? So I was very, very excited about that opportunity. But then it crashed about 6 months before I was to vest. And then eventually I did, cash out, but went from a 7-figure number down to, next to nothing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things we can dig into there as we talk about resilience.
Yeah, that was,
Because now you took that.
that's right. So it wasn't long after that, actually, it was a tough time in the tech business to just get a job. Okay. Because everybody had taken that hit. Okay. And so I kind of, messed around, did a little consulting here and there, but I kind of was anxious to do my own thing again and have control, right? I felt like all of a sudden I was losing all this control and I wanted control. I wanted me to be the guy to lead. And so I had a great buddy of mine, long lifetime friend, Gary Armstrong in Richmond, who said he was a commercial banker and he had knew this guy that was about to invest a lot of money in this startup called V Meals. And this was back in 2003. So he connected me with those guys, looked at the business model summary. And, as soon as I read the summary, I'm like, wow, I know I can do that. Okay. And so I got on board with him. I purchased the license rights to the Washington, D.C. metro area to go sell that service. And what that was the same thing as LoCo. It was a catering marketplace of restaurants where corporations and pharmaceutical reps could go and order food for their meetings. But we didn't do our own delivery. We had to rely on the restaurants to do delivery. So that was a big differentiator from what I'm doing today and what I was doing then. But for 16 years, I did that in Washington, D.C. Actually, let me take a step back. After V Meals started for about 3 or 4 years, that I got that going, and we were pushing a couple $1 million in sales in Washington and doing this, and customers were jumping on. I added a rewards program, which was very successful for customers. They love rewards, okay? And customer service was key in the catering marketplace industry. So that grew, and then all of a sudden the Great Recession came. Okay. And then at that
And so
time,
is that what brought you now you had the Great Recession, and then you also later had to deal with the pandemic, right? So
that's
what
right.
eventually, if we could fast forward a little bit, what eventually got you to Tampa Bay?
So, yeah. So what happened is COVID came along and, that was another knockdown for me because it was office catering and everybody went home to work. So imagine one day, and I remember March the 14th, which is my birthday, looking at my order queue, okay, of catering orders coming up. And all of a sudden it just kept going down and down and down until it was zero. So I'm sitting in Washington, D.C., living in D.C. With no income. And, everybody on the news was talking about what this is the next wave is going to be people working from home. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I saw the writing on the wall. But fortunately, just a little bit before that, I had explored an opportunity, learned of a ASAP delivery service out of Iowa with my business partner, Kyle Brown. And we really liked the model. That was in late 2023. So I decided when the catering went away, well, let me start this ASAP model in Tampa.
Now, was that to deliver directly to consumers at
That
home?
that was more of a competition to compete with Uber Eats and DoorDash and Grubhub. And the basis behind that was to create a co-op. of restaurants that own the service. And then we would reduce the commission that the restaurant had to pay from 30% that Uber Eats and them were charging down to 15. So it was really a model to help the local independent restaurants, okay, survive and that. So that's we decided to start up a franchise here in Tampa. Now I had visited Tampa a few times in the past just for fun and love the area. So that's really why I picked Tampa.
Yeah, a lot of people moved to Tampa following the pandemic. I think that there was the warm weather outside made it more appealing. I think when you had to deal with the everything that was going on. So, Mike,
Absolutely.
you've had a really, you've had a lot. There's a lot in that story, that I think we could dig into. And I'd like to, if you don't mind, kind of talk about a few things that you mentioned
Mhm.
briefly in your story. As I was listening to you talk, I heard you say, you started out talking about how you learned to prepare and work hard and strive for the best, even in high school and at a very early age, but with your mentors. And that really, I think, served you pretty well. You then talked a lot about failures along the way. So I'd like to back up just a little bit and pick your brain around about this whole idea of what it takes to be an entrepreneur and what it takes to move from working for somebody else to being your own boss. When you did that, you made that leap, back early in your career. You were in your 30s, I think you said,
Yeah.
to be an entrepreneur. Talk to us a little bit about some of the things you learned. And I know you learned a very hard lesson when that non-compete came back on you. But what were some of the skills that really were most important to you, and the mindset, I guess, to help you make that leap? What were a couple of the top things that you would say for that first leap? And then we'll talk about some of the other things as well.
Yeah, so, the first leap is when I really got into sales, okay? Learning to listen to your customer, okay? And not think you know it all, but you have to listen. And customers, and there was a sales rep, I remember, a regional sales rep from Sybase one time that I learned from, and he was like, "You know what? What you do is you gotta talk to your customer and ask them, 'Hey, if you have a magic wand and you could wave a magic wand, what would you want this software to do? Or, what are you trying to accomplish? Right? And that will get a customer start thinking about, well, you know what, this is a pain and that's a pain. And, I'd really like for this to work better. So you really have to listen and learn what that customer's pain is.
Yeah, that all goes back to creating value, right?
That,
If we're not creating value,
that's
and
right.
that's I do think that especially for any student that might be listening, that sales can be a really powerful career to prepare you to be an entrepreneur. Would you agree with that?
100%, because it does give you that way to talk to a customer directly, learn what they're doing, and then, try to solve those problems. I mean, that's really what you're out solving problems for them.
Yeah.
That's very, very key. And then,
Yeah.
once you do that, then it's about service, right? It's about customer service. You have to take care of them. You have to listen, and then you have to do what they want you to do, right? And to keep them happy and coming back. So,
I'm glad you mentioned customer service because that it seems like, and maybe it's because I'm getting old, I don't know, but it seems like in today's world, customer service has gone by the wayside a little bit. Have you seen that? And do you have any thoughts? Maybe I'm wrong, but if you would you agree with that? And if so, it can be a great differentiator, I think, for a
it,
business
it, it,
to
it
really dig into that customer service piece.
yeah, I think it's become, it's not as personable, right? And people like to work with people, I believe. Okay. They want to see you, they want to hear from you, not some, automation. Okay. They want to feel like that you are there to take care of them. And I think and that's exactly what we do. I mean, we have what we call our catering assistant. And Tyler does a lot of that, and he works directly with pharmaceutical reps. And they're paying pharmaceutical reps are going into doc offices every day to do presentations, and their only time to do that is during lunch, okay? Because they're busy
Okay.
seeing patients,
Now I
right?
see.
The rest of the time. So they get about a 45-minute time period, which means that number one, the lunch has to be there on time. Okay, it has to be right. So, and when I say right, meaning that, you order lunch for 20, 30 people in the office, and the doc says, "Hey, I need a veggie sandwich," right? And then the caterer shows up with all the food, but does not bring the veggie sandwich. Now you're leaving the doc without eating for the day. Okay, that doesn't make a
That's
pharmaceutical
not
rep
good.
happy. That's not good. But so what we do is we make it super easy for them when they can just call us up and say, "Mike, I'm going to this doc office. Here's my budget. Take care of it." Okay. So that's one less thing they have to worry about, because remember, they're about trying to educate their doctors and their staff about what they're doing. That's how they, are successful. That's how they make their money. That's how they keep their job.
That's
Okay.
right. That's
Right.
right.
And so these meetings, and I've learned over the years that about 65 to 70% of our caterings are actually salespeople. Okay. They are going in. These are salespeople that are going in to talk to financial institutions, architectural firms, accounting firms, engineering firms. You name it. There's somebody trying to sell to that industry, right? And in that industry, they, they have to go. The best way to do that is to, hold on, I just lost you. Okay. The best way to do that is to get in front of them. And typically you want a group of people
Sure. Sure.
to listen
It's
to
a
your message. And
it's a
lunch is the
great
best way to
model.
get them all there, right? They all want to
Yeah.
eat lunch. And so
Yeah.
that's how you get them there.
It's a great model, and I hadn't thought about tying into that, but it's a great what it brings to mind to me for me is the importance, you mentioned listening to the customer, but all this experience that you've gained with having this, multifaceted career, and you bring up the important point. I think that it's about people today. I mean, service is about people, but you've also been a tech guy, and there's so much we can do right now with technology, and so I find it really interesting, and I'd love your thoughts for the listener out there who's maybe trying to build a business. They've got all kinds of technology and they need to use it because they can be more productive and it's very valuable. But how do you balance that humanity versus tech? And especially in today's world. And I'm guessing it goes back to people, which I want to dig into next, like how you
That's right.
pick people. But what are your thoughts on balancing that humanity and technology equation?
Well, I mean, you have to be able to, like you say, you have to have some technology to be efficient, especially if you are looking to scale your business. You need it, right? You need to always, and this is something I'm just consumed with, is being an entrepreneur. I'm consumed and passionate about what I'm doing. And, I'm always looking for better ways to take care of my customers, better ways, right? To do deliveries, all aspects of my business. You kind of have to drill down in each of those areas, right? And try to find better ways to, uh, be more efficient, which would ultimately provide a better service, for your customer and allow you to scale the business. And that's something that I'm always looking at, and you always have to be looking at, as well as you have to be watching what are your competitors out there doing, right? Who's out there? What are they doing? What, that's maybe better than what you are doing. So you're also learning from them and then trying to figure out, well, what can I do different that helps me stand out in the customer's eye?
Yeah.
And,
So how do you find, as you think about it, you're right. You've got to find the technology that helps you be more efficient.
mhm,
But as you said earlier, people want to deal with people. So I'm guessing that you put a lot of effort into building teams as well of people, not just building your stack of technology, but building teams, and that those have equal priority, or maybe one has priority over the other. I don't know. But
That's right.
go ahead. Like what
Well, I
what
was
are
just
what are
going to
your
say, I
thoughts
mean, our
about that?
team is mostly made up of delivery drivers. Okay. I mean, they're that's who the customer sees when they go to make a delivery.
So are they independent contractors like
They are
Uber?
independent contractors.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So how do you find good people to do that? That's a challenge
That,
because a lot of people are doing that as side hustles and,
that's right.
it may not be something they're extremely passionate about. So it may not be their primary focus. And again, I don't want to make assumptions, but I would think that's a challenging position to fill. And what do you look for there?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're looking a lot of times what we'll do is go to restaurants, okay, and some of our partners already and say, who have you noticed that's been, a delivery driver that's always been here on time for you to pick up the meal, for example? Have they been professional, right? So a lot of those, you work with your restaurant partners and they see them coming in, maybe working for a competitor or whatever. So a lot of that comes from them. And then what we'll do is, I'll sit down and meet with them, personally. And I've got this long list of, you know, here's, how important this is. I'll give them the farm rep scenario story of, imagine, this rep, this is their job on the line. Okay. And get them to understand how important their job is. Okay. To doing what we're doing and being successful. And then as well as, when I look the ASAP model, even though it didn't succeed for us in St. Pete and we pivoted to catering about a couple of years ago, it helped me understand more about drivers and delivery because I all of a sudden became a delivery driver myself. And I have personally delivered over 600 orders in the Tampa Bay area. So, I learned, the stresses involved in that and the challenges for drivers. So one of the things for an entrepreneur is you really need to understand every single aspect of your business. You need to do it, not just think you know it. You have to do it. Believe me, when you start doing it, then you really understand what's going on. Okay.
That's such great advice, I think, to have empathy for every job.
That's right.
So we just like when I was talking about maybe making assumptions about why people were doing what they were doing, you never know until you've done it, right? And
That's
those
correct.
assumptions can be dangerous.
That's right. That's absolutely right. You have to put yourself in their shoes, okay, and every part of the business. And so I did that, and I was the first catering delivery driver for LoCo for catering in Tampa Bay. I was the first one. I delivered the first couple of months, and then I took Tyler with me, okay, my son with me on those deliveries, and then he started learning about it. And of course, I was coaching him the whole time. But so he picked up on it. And now we are out, recruiting drivers. And I can pretty much tell right away if a driver is going to be good. Well, one example is, hey, I'm going to meet you and we're going to be at I'm going to meet you at this restaurant at this time. Well, guess what? One, if they don't show up, they're off the team. If they're late, then pretty much they're off the team for the meeting, right? Because that's showing me they're not respecting, my time, or they're not going to respect the customer's time. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of an interview of understanding what they're doing, right? How they do it today, and then get them to understand what I'm expecting from them to make sure that they're doing a good job. And, the other thing is you have to pay the drivers, right? So your team has to be compensated, right? You can't get greedy and think, well, I'm just going to treat them like, the big corporate customers do, right? I mean, I've heard nightmares of, DoorDash being sued for not paying tips, for goodness sakes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But so, yeah, you have to be fair and
Yeah,
you have to make sure they are respected.
I
Okay.
think it's really interesting because, when you talked about your customer, you said you've got to have empathy for your customer, right? You got to listen, you got to understand what they're going through, you got to have empathy. You want to make sure you're meeting their needs, you're giving them value. And you said a lot of the same things about your employees or independent contractors that work for you. You've got to have empathy, you got to listen to them, you got to understand what they're going through. You got to create value for them because they're in a contractual relationship with you as well.
That's right.
and whether it's employee or independent contractor. So it is, I think, a good reminder that business is about people and
Not people.
relationships that we build along the way. So I'm really interested in your, I'd like to talk a little bit about marketing and markets. And you gave an example of working with pharmaceutical reps, which I wouldn't have thought of as being a primary market for you, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
How do you think about marketing? And if you're talking to somebody out there who's thinking about starting a business and um, they got a great idea, they love what they're doing, and they're passionate about it, and they sort of feel like their market is very broad. They can reach everybody, but they know that it's probably as a startup, an early stage company, you got to identify some powerful niches or niches of markets. So, how do you go about finding the right place to start, the right niche for what you're doing?
Well, I think once you've found, well, you've kind of found the model that you feel like you're passionate about, right? The next thing to do to get that going and right is partnerships. Okay. So key is partnerships. And, my partnership, I knew when I created this social enterprise that, again, we give up to 50% of our profits back to the community. So there's not a lot of companies that do that. I don't know, Rebecca, how many you know in Tampa Bay that do that, but there's probably not many.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. I value, number one, you value your customers, right? Because without the customers, you have no business. So we give up to 26% of our profits back to them. We give 14% back to referrals. Okay. So in an internet world, you're either paying Google for Google ads a lot of money, or you rely on your neighbors to help you spread the word. And that's what I'm doing. I'd rather pay my neighbor than Google. And then 10% goes to the partnership, which we established with the Florida Cancer Specialist Foundation. Okay. And so the way that partnership works is it's a win-win because the Florida Cancer Specialist offices, all right, these are the doc offices where cancer patients go in to be seen. They will refer pharmaceutical reps to us. Okay. Because the reps will call, the way it goes, typically the rep will call the office and say, "Hey, I'm coming in. What do you want for lunch?" Okay. That's just the way it works. Right. And they're playing phone tag with the office, whatever. It's a pain for them, but they do it. They have to do it. And some just don't. They just give them whatever. But a lot of them, want to know. And so what we do, what happens is when that office refers a rep and the rep calls us, okay, then we start working with the rep to make it easy. And then we donate every time that rep places an order, not only for Florida Cancer, but anywhere they go, for example, oncology, any oncology office they go to, we make a donation to the Florida Cancer Specialist Foundation. So through their offices, we are actually helping the patients that they're taking care of, right? The ones that can't work, we're helping taking care of them. Okay. So it's a
So,
win-win for
yeah.
everyone. And, not only for the offices, for the reps, for the patients, for LoCo, for everybody that's in that ecosystem, right? And we're all keeping that money local. That's what's key, Rebecca, is
Is that
keeping
is
that.
that what LoCo means?
That's what LoCo means. It means local, So it's about keeping that money local, mainly because, being in this industry, there's really only one competitor that we have, and that's out of Boston. It's a national corporation. And, when I started this, looking at the model, I looked at them. I knew they were going to be the Goliath. Okay. They are the Goliath in the space. There's really no one else out there. It's called Easy Cater, but they're taking, 150, $200 million out of communities across the country today and growing. Okay. Because catering marketplace industry is about 20 to $25 billion for office catering. Okay. A lot of people don't understand how big that is, but it's big. And so, I looked at that and I said, well, you know what? I can create a better service and give back, for the community and keep that money home where it belongs, right? We need to do that. I think America needs to do more of that today. Um, in general, we need to compete. And that's all it is. We're just, as a community, build a model that competes with some corporations that are out there.
Think that, something you brought up this very powerful, you said you can either give your money to Google Ads or you can give it back in a way that at the end of the day is going to bring awareness to what you're doing and
That's right.
and also leave people with a really good feeling about what you're doing. In one of my earliest podcasts, I interviewed the founders of Barefoot Wine. They're Bonnie Harvey and Michael Houlihan out in California, and they've since sold that wine to Gallo, and it's most people know Barefoot, but they started that wine. It's a great startup story, and I encourage anybody listening. And Mike, you might really enjoy listening to it as well. But they talked a lot about they ran into a licensing issue. Selling alcohol has all kinds of problems with licensing and permits, and you can imagine. But they ran into a period of time where they weren't able to actually sell their wine, so they gave it away at charity events
Ah,
during that time
okay.
frame. And think of all the people who got the chance to experience it and left with a really positive feeling about that product. Turned that 6 months where they weren't able to actually sell their product into a time frame where they actually, developed a following. Like you, their philosophy around marketing all the way around has been more of an approach, a charitable kind of giving, or at least a partnership, as you pointed out,
Right.
way to think about it. And I think that's really powerful. It may not work for every business, but I think if we had more of that, we might solve more problems and companies could succeed with that kind of marketing. It's a great approach. I want to switch gears just a little bit. I know we could talk about all these things. I mean, you and I could talk all day. And I mean, we've both been
As my friends would say, oh Lord, don't get him started.
yeah. We've both had a lot of years to be doing this, so we got a lot of stories. I do want to dig in. Something that kept coming back in your story and has come back is something I talk about in my book about entrepreneurial competencies, See, Do, Repeat, and it is the ability to execute past failure. And I've never met a successful person that didn't have failures along the way. Now, they didn't let failures stop them, but they had outcomes, let's say, that weren't what they wanted. And so you talked about a few of those. So I do want to take a few minutes to talk about resilience, and especially for a new entrepreneur out there that might be struggling right now, or that might be afraid of the struggle that's ahead of them. Can you talk a little bit about what's your mindset and how do you personally deal with failure? And, I don't know if you have, maybe a few tips for our listeners about how you've gotten to this point and you're still passionate and you're still motivated and you're still getting out there every day. And if you have to do the delivery, you do it. And
Absolutely.
because you believe in what you're doing and you're making a difference.
Right.
So how do you do that? How do you overcome that? And what's a couple of secrets or tips you might share?
Learn to get some thick skin over time, but it's the failure is going to happen. It's going to happen. You're going to think, man, oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many times I thought, okay, this is going to be the one, this is going to be the one, this is going to be the one. But, you accept it, you learn from it. You can't let it just, get you down, but you have to, if something's not working, you have to continue to pivot. You have to pivot, pivot, pivot. And I've done a lot of that, over time. If something's, not working, then, well, what else is there? Okay. You don't just give up, right? Or say, I can't do that, you have to find a way. And you have to be determined, and that's where that passion comes in. It helps you, that one day, I mean, I can tell you, there's been a number of times, during my journey here with LoCo, naysayers, people telling me, even some friends, right? Well, Mike, I don't know. That doesn't look like that's going to work for you. I don't know. Maybe you should try to find something else. I mean, I've heard that all my life, right? But I use that as kind of motivation, actually, to go, you know what? I can do this, and I'm going to get back in there and grind it out. So I think never give up. Right. My grandfather used to say, where there's a will, there's a way. So I think that's important. I think the other big thing, advice I would give is certainly surround yourself with as many smart people as you can. Okay. There's no way you can know it all, and don't try to be a know it all. You have to be open minded to learn. Um, and I've done that pretty much all my life. I mean, you could tell that, the people that through my career that have helped me and understand, okay, where you're headed here, Mike. Think about this, think about that. People that really you can talk to and brainstorm with over time. So that's really kind of been, get up the next day and that day before it's been a terrible day, get up, start a new day. Okay, let's go get it. And like my old boss used to say, my first sales manager, he goes, take the bull by the horns, Mike. You got to take the bull. As I was about to get fired, after my first quarter, take the bull by the horns. But I think that's kind of the way you have to keep, have to keep.
Yeah. That's such great advice. And I think, sales is probably a great training ground. Again, not everybody's going to go through that path, but, as an entrepreneur, you're selling anyway. And,
Right.
you
You're
know,
always selling.
learning to hear no and understanding that no is getting you a little bit closer to yes, I
Right.
think is part of that lesson there. And I love your advice surrounding yourself with really smart people because
And a
you
good,
can't know it all.
absolute, and a good financial person.
Yeah, that's really
Okay. Because
I've
you may
learned
have the
that one
best
too.
idea in the world, right? But if the numbers don't work, okay, then don't go there or figure out how you make that work, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
was lucky, worked with a gentleman by the name of Kyle Brown at Cater Nation, and he was a financial kind of whiz guy. And he helped me, initially when I started looking at this model. I mean, I had about, 20 years worth of data from doing that. But, we put it into a big spreadsheet and said, okay, if I'm going to give this much money back, what am I going to end up with, right? And how long
yeah,
is it going to take me to get there? So, he was a huge part of, you know, really helping me put those financial numbers together and brainstorming. Me and him used to brainstorm at Cater Nation for hours and hours and hours and hours almost every day. I mean, about the business. He was very passionate about it as well. But yeah, I think, again, it's about surrounding those with some really good people, finding the right partnership. Okay. That's a win-win. It can't just be one-sided, right? You have to have that right partnership. And I think then you really got a solid platform to move forward.
yeah. I think that's great, and I'm glad you brought up surrounding yourself with smart financial people because that for me has also made a huge difference in a lot of different ways. So, Mike,
Absolutely.
I would love to talk more. I think we have to get you back on the show and dig into
I'd
some
love
other
to.
things, but I know you've got a business to run, and I always end. You've given some great feedback and advice already, and you might have already mentioned your one piece of advice, but I always end my
Sure.
conversation with one piece of advice. And in your case, I'm going to ask you, what's one piece of advice you wish somebody had told you before you started on your career? What would have helped you the most?
Gosh, I mean, I think that you got to believe in yourself, right? I think that starts there. Okay, you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in the model that you are passionate about, and then those other things that will help you succeed. So I think that's the thing. You have to believe. Set some goals, right? Don't be confident, right? And just continue down that road of working hard. I mean, as an entrepreneur, you have to be willing to put a lot of hours in and not getting paid. Okay, that's the other
Yeah.
part. All right, sometimes you do not get paid. I mean, I've gone through LoCo, and I have to say, for a couple of years, I didn't pay myself a dime. But and I've started to pay myself now because we're starting to to take off. So I'm really excited about the future. But you have to be ready for, for those tough times, and then, again, continue to be positive and move forward.
Mike, that's great advice. I think it all starts with a belief in yourself and trusting yourself, and just then taking that leap, even though you're not going to know what's ahead of you, and
That's it.
surround yourself with smart people to help you through. That's really great advice. So, Mike, this has been a great conversation. As we end the conversation, tell us where our guests can connect with you and find out more about LoCo Tampa Bay.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Rebecca. If the best way is just, go into our website. Okay. LoCo, LoCo, TampaBay.com. And then, when you first come to the page and you scroll down, you'll see a little bit about, why we care, what we're doing to give back. But then there'll be some other tabs at the top. One, you can meet some of the investors in LoCo. Okay, like Copeland Moore from La Segunda. Okay, right here in our backyard. Ferg Sports Bar, Mark Ferguson from St. Pete. Pete Boland from St. Pete. Right. I mean, so you'll see some of the people that help me kind of get this thing going with financially, and then you'll see some other tabs about what we do for restaurants, what we do for drivers. Okay, so and then the big one is, okay, what our customers are saying, right? I could sit here and say, oh, I'm great all day long. But what do customers really say? So if you were to Google, LoCo Tampa Bay reviews, or just go and read the reviews, I think you'll be impressed with what customers have to say. And that's the part that really also helps motivate me too. Okay. When you hear customers say nice things about you, it really is a motivating factor to continue to do what you're doing and just keep doing it better and harder, and spreading the word. I mean, that's really what we want to do, is spread the word, because again, I'm not spending any money with Google. I'm counting on my friends and my neighbors. Okay. To help me spread the word, and then compensate them for doing that. I
Yeah.
mean, it's fair is fair. So
Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope that this episode of the podcast does help spread the word about LoCo Tampa Bay.
thank you very
I'm a
much.
fan, and I know my staff at the University of LoCo Tampa Low Center, we're all fans, and we've loved working with you. So thank you again for joining me today and for sharing your story.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I really appreciate it.
Mike Magee's story reminds us that entrepreneurship is as much about tenacity and it is about innovation, and that our setbacks are often containing seeds of our biggest breakthroughs. From selling tech in the early days to hand delivering meals in Tampa Bay, Mike has lived the mantra of work hard, play hard. But he's also shown us the deeper value of reinvention, community impact, and staying true to what you believe in. And perhaps most powerfully, he reminds us that mentors matter and that each of us, through how we show up and persist, might just be a role model to someone else. If you enjoyed today's episode, I hope you'll share it with someone who could use a little inspiration. And as always, thank you for listening to The In Factor. Until next time, keep showing up, keep learning, and keep building.